Welcome back. My name is Derek Main. This is Read the World, and I review translated literature. Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. God, pronunciations are hard for me. Translated by Elisabeth Jaquette, and this is a New Directions paperback. I believe in other parts of the world it's a Fitzcarraldo edition. But I actually love this cover. Look at that gorgeous cover right there. This is a really thin novel at 105 pages in this edition. And we're going to talk about the structure and what it accomplishes, what it does well. I love this book, so I'm going to recommend this book full-throatedly. But I want to talk a little bit about how it took me a bit to get into. And that has to do with the structure of the thing. So quickly on the plot, it's called Minor Detail. There is, and this is all back cover stuff. I'm not going to give away anything, but we have a crime that happens in August of 1949 as Israeli soldiers are, occupying the Palestinian area and sort of clearing the area, towns and villages of Arabs so they can build settlements. And this is a dicey political topic, as you can probably imagine. So I'm not going to discuss the conflict between Israel and Palestine any further in this review, but you should know that is what the politics of this book are about. So we'll be talking about it from a literature perspective, but we are not going to talk about sort of the finer details of these disputes because I'm not qualified to do so, not because I do not have an opinion. Okay, so this is going to focus on one really singular event that happens as the Israeli soldiers as these Jewish soldiers, because at this point it's not Israel, but as these Jewish soldiers are combing the area where a young woman is found along with a dog, and they keep the woman captive and clean her, and then eventually rape and kill her. So that is the crime. And the title, Minor Detail, comes because there is a minor detail that in present day is sort of observed by the person who will be our guide and our investigator into this. So let me stop walking around it and kind of say we've got a two-act structure. I believe the translator said initially that the author had wanted, when writing this in Arabic, to have this same equal amount of characters in part 1 as part 2, and that didn't quite happen, but they did end up with pages. I'd have to check my edition, but I think it's almost exact here as well. It's not exactly to the letter, but it's equal parts. Part 1 is in August of 1949, and it follows what I would call a psychopathic soldier. That's why, let's circle back, it took me a minute to get into it, because it is difficult being inside this dude's head. And we follow his every movement. When he wakes up, when he goes and sort of searches the surrounding area, when he gets gasoline, these very minute details. Back right to the title, the whole time you're kind of thinking what is the minor detail? And I'm not going to spoiler say what the minor detail is, only to say that it is truly a minor detail, and that does not necessarily mean that it is evidence or a clue. It is just a minor detail. Just think of those words, It's something that could set someone off on a search, but it is not something that gives any answers, if that makes sense. So that's the two-act structure. So that first part, I'm going to do quotes throughout as I talk about this one because of the nature of this one. On page 34, I'm going to give you an example of some writing in that soldier's head. And I think you'll see why it made me so uncomfortable and why it took me I had to stop and start in that first part. Painful. The dog was still barking when he returned to the camp. He headed straight for the second hut, and as he drew closer it barked even louder. He asked the soldier on guard if everything was all right, and the guard answered yes. Suddenly the door opened, and the girl stepped out, crying and babbling incomprehensible fragments that intertwined with the dog's ceaseless barking. And in that moment after dusk, before complete darkness fell, as her mouth released a language different to theirs, the girl became a stranger again, despite how closely she resembled all the soldiers in camp. To the right of the hut, the guard stood motionless and hung his head, avoiding the gaze of his superior, who indifferently shook his head. So she looks the same because they've shaved her head and put her in the same clothes as them. And this soldier comes back. Excuse me. The soldier comes back, and the guard, so she comes out, and she's like babbling incomprehensibly because they don't understand each other's language, and it mixes to this like cacophony with the dog barking. And the soldier that we're in with stares like right, at the guard, just sort of wordlessly asking like, what happened? What's going on? Why is this happening? And the guard shakes his head, and then the soldier is indifferent. And that's really hard to read, and really hard to go through that whole part, because obviously this is stuff that still happens. I mean, women are victims of rape and murder every single day. Usually it's by someone they know. But the unnecessariness of this and the historical nature of it, I think, it was just difficult. And the way this soldier was just, it wasn't their job to go. I think there is a pull as a reader to want to do this thing where you compare the rape of the woman to the rape of the land, because the land is what at stake. And I think that's really, really false and not the way to look at this particular story. That is a common trope, and it's something that's certainly done throughout literature and in fact in the Bible as well. But the reason it doesn't work here is because there's nothing. The woman offers them nothing. There's not anything. They're trying to take the land so that they can settle their people and so that they can have a home, okay? And neither here nor there whether it's the right thing to do. I mean, I live on land that was also stolen. Many of us do. But the young girl, she's not doing anything to cause them harm, and she is certainly not in their way. And so that indifference adds another element of violence in an already violent situation that is difficult. All right, the second structure. Let's talk about the second act. So the first act was hard. It took me a while to get through. Emotional. It's tough stuff to read. The second part is probably my favorite writing of the year. The second part, I would follow this narrator of the second section through a 500-page novel. I think it'd be fascinating. I love this character that Adania Shibli has created and that Elisabeth Jaquette has translated. She is somewhere on an autistic spectrum, possibly Asperger's. We'll just kind of put it out there like that. I mean, that's kind of made clear. And she's got but she's being a private detective for this one violent incident that we've already witnessed in the first part through the soldier's eyes. Okay. And so I'm going to do for her, let's do page 54. This gives a really good example of who she is, her and her thoughts, and let's get in her head, because it's a much better place to be than the other one. The borders imposed between things here are many. One must pay attention to them and navigate them, which ultimately protects everyone from perilous consequences. This grants a person a sense of serenity despite everything else. There are some people who navigate borders masterfully, who never trespass, but these people are few, and I'm not one of them. As soon as I see a border, I either race toward it and leap over, or cross it stealthily with a step. Neither of these two behaviors is conscious or rooted in a premeditated desire to resist borders. It's more like sheer stupidity. To be quite honest, once I cross a border, I fall into a deep pit of anxiety. It's a matter, simply put, of clumsiness. Once I realized that I inevitably fail whenever I try to navigate borders, I decided to stay within the confines of my house as much as possible. So I really like that part. Of course, borders are a huge theme throughout the second part because now we are in present day and these borders have been established thanks in large part to the work of the soldiers in the first section. And there's a lot of like area A to area B to area C and area D and all the complications that she must navigate. She who is not someone filled with confidence. And she has to navigate this because of her race, because of her religion, in this place where she was born, but that is not quite her home, because it is sort of someone else's home. She is a visitor. And I think that's made clear to her and to her colleagues who are in the same position. They have oftentimes, they're from towns that don't exist anymore. They've been raised for new settlements. So anyway, I really like that part about navigating the borders because obviously that's a huge theme and it's also the reality there. I wrote down, so let's look at the dichotomy between these two. We've got this quiet confidence of the soldier in part one. Okay, and with that, there is a terror. That quiet confidence comes with it, that indifference we saw earlier, that there's a terror to that that really grips you as a reader. But then second, you have the nervous indecisiveness of the girl. This girl who's got such a nervous disposition and is so sort of upset by the world around her and just finds it hard to navigate. All right, so why is that? What is that difference? Well, the most interesting thing about Minor Detail, I think, is it explores how trauma is passed on from generation to generation. So the pain done to the people and to the land, and very specifically to the girl in the first part, the rape and murder, that is not a thing that is done and then erased from history. Even if it's a crime that could never be solved, or even if it's someone, maybe let's say a crime that justice will never be served for, it lives in the bodies of future generations. That violence, that pain, that trauma is passed on, okay? That happens in all aspects of life. It does not always have to be political. I'm going to finish with my favorite part, which is page 58. I think I wrote in my notes, just my favorite part. So I wish I had given myself a little more of a clue here. But this is, okay, yeah, this is just for writing wise, my favorite part. And then I'm going to let it go and I'm going to publish it and press send. And, well, first I'm going to plug that in so the battery doesn't die. Might not edit this one much. This is a raw book that I recommend, and so I'm gonna say I'm gonna let myself be raw as a reviewer as I tell the story. Page 58. Of course, this may seem like pure narcissism. The fact that what drew me to the incident, what made it begin haunting me, was the presence of a detail that is really quite minor when compared to the incident's major details, which can only be described as tragic. It's completely plausible, though, for this type of narcissism to exist in someone. It's an innate tendency, one might say, toward a belief in the uniqueness of the self, toward regarding the life one leads so highly that one cannot but love life and everything about it. But since I do not love my life in particular, nor life in general, and at present any efforts on my part are solely channeled towards staying alive, I doubt that a diagnosis of narcissism would fully apply to me here. It's something else, something related more to that inability of mine to identify borders between things and evaluate situations rationally and logically, which in many cases leads me to see the fly shit on a painting and not the painting itself, as the saying goes. I really like that part. Minor detail. I really liked it. All right. We got to end this one the same way we always do. Please be good to folks.